Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to day 9 of our 24 days Advent Bible reading going through the Gospel of Luke. I apologize that I am late jumping on tonight, later than I have been at least, and it's for a couple reasons. I've been working and I just stopped working about 10 minutes ago. So here we are. And I will say, Buddy, the cat, will not be interrupting us tonight. He is in timeout because he just attacked my foot and bit me. So he had to go to timeout for that. So he will not be disturbing us and distracting us tonight. I'm sorry I kept you guys waiting. I appreciate you being here. As you come into the room, go ahead and drop a note in the comments. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you're catching this on the replay, because I am later than usual tonight, again, I apologize for that. Big project at work that we have a deadline on and we're trying to get out. So it'll all be good once we get that out. But I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Go ahead and drop a note. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you are watching from and what you're excited about for Luke 9 tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and we'll see what Luke 9 serves up for us tonight. Okay? Jesus summoned together his 12 apostles and imparted to them authority over every demon and the power to heal every disease. Then he commissioned them to preach God's kingdom realm and to heal the sick to demonstrate that the kingdom had arrived. As he sent them out, he gave them these instructions: take nothing extra on your journey. Just go as you are. Don't carry a staff, a backpack, food, money, not even a change of clothes. Wow, not even a change of clothes? I might would have had to question Jesus on that one. Just kidding. Anyway, whatever home welcomes you as a guest, remain there and make it your base of ministry. And whatever your ministry is rejected, and not, hold on, I got to turn the page. Wherever your ministry is rejected and not welcomed, you are to leave that town and shake the dust off your shoes as a testimony before them. The apostles departed and went into the villages with the wonderful news of God's kingdom realm, and they instantly healed diseases wherever they went. So they went out commissioned by Jesus to do all the things they had seen and witnessed him do, and he gave them the authority to do those things in his name. The interesting thing here is that his instruction to them to take nothing extra with them. No staff, no bread, no money, no extra clothes. So that required not only faith from them, but it was a requirement and it was a indication of Jesus asking them to step out in obedience with less than what they thought they should have or what they wish they had. So from that, let that be an encouragement to you that sometimes there may be a dream in your heart. There may be something that God has asked you to do, and you don't have everything you need yet to do it. But he's asking you to take that first step of faith and to go out and begin. And as you go, those things will be provided for you. So as the disciples went out and they started these ministries, this ministry of healing people and setting them free, the things that they needed were provided for them. And if they went into a place and it wasn't, well, then they were to just leave. So what is that thing? That the challenge and the inward reflection here for this section of verse tonight is, what is the thing that God has put in your heart to do, and that it requires that first step of obedience and stepping out in faith to do it, even though you don't feel fully prepared yet, and even though you may not have everything that you think you should have or that you wish you had in order to accomplish that thing. Okay? So Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on. That's good stuff. Now Herod, the governor, was confused and perplexed when he heard the reports of all the miracles of Jesus and his apostles. Many were saying John the Baptist has come back to life. Others said this has to be Elijah, who has reappeared, or one of the prophets of old who has risen from the dead. These were the rumors circulating throughout the land. Herod exclaimed, "Who is this man? I keep hearing about him over and over. It can't be the prophet John. I had him beheaded." Herod was very eager to meet Jesus. Months later, the apostles returned from their ministry tour. So they were gone for several months, remember, with no food, no extra clothes, no supplies. They were just sent out with what they had, the clothes on their backs. So it says here they were gone for months like that. So there had to be provision, right? So months later, the apostles returned from their ministry tour and told Jesus all the wonders and miracles they had witnessed. Jesus, wanting to be alone with the 12, quietly slipped away with them toward Bethsaida. But the crowds soon found out about it and took off after him. When they caught up with Jesus, he graciously welcomed them all, taught them more about God's kingdom realm, and healed all who were sick. As the day wore on, the 12 came to Jesus and told him, "It's getting late. You should send the crowds away to the surrounding villages and farms to get something to eat and find shelter for the night. There's nothing to eat here in the middle of nowhere." Jesus responded, "You have the food to feed them." I can imagine they were looking at each other like, "You got the food? No, you got the food? You got the food?" They replied, "All we have are these 5 small loaves of bread and 2 dried fish." Again, they didn't have as much as they thought they needed or as much as they may have wanted. Again, we're seeing this theme again. Do you really expect us to go buy food for all these people? There are nearly 5,000 men here with women and children. He told his disciples, "Have them all sit down in groups of 50 each." After everyone was seated, Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and gazing into the heavenly realm, he gave thanks for the food. Then, in the presence of his disciples, he broke off pieces of bread and fish and kept giving more to each disciple to give to the crowd. It was multiplying before their very eyes. So everyone ate until they were filled, and afterward the disciples gathered up the leftovers. It came to exactly 12 baskets full. So after the apostles came back, they returned. Jesus tries to slip away and spend some private time with them, but the crowds, they find him. They're like a paparazzi, right? They found him. And so he welcomed him. He didn't turn him away. He welcomed him, the whole crowd, 5,000 men plus women and children, and he was teaching and healing and ministering to them, and they were hungry. And as we read here, all they had was the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, right? So when Jesus saw how tired and needy the people were, he didn't turn them away and send them to go home and fend for themselves. He had compassion for them because it was a long journey to get to where they were. And so Jesus knew that they needed some sort of provision and sustenance. So he provided for that, even though the disciples, all they could see was the scarcity of what was missing and the fact that they didn't have enough. Again, they didn't have as much as they thought they needed, and they didn't have as much as they wanted in order to meet the need. But Jesus shows them and demonstrates for them the miracle of provision. So here again, the same theme that we had in the first 6 verses of the chapter, where Jesus sent them out with no money, no food, no extra clothes, just to go and trust that God would provide along the way. And they had to take that first step of faith and obedience. The same here. They had to take that first step of faith and obedience and follow Jesus' instructions to separate the people into groups of 50. And then after Jesus had blessed the little bit that they had, they saw right before their very eyes as they gave it out. Now, the Bible doesn't say that those 5 loaves and 2 fish multiplied immediately into enough. Come on, there's something here on this. It does not say that it multiplied immediately into enough to visibly be able to feed 5,000 people. He divided what was there and gave it to the 12 and told them to go and start passing it out. And as they passed it out, it just never ran out. So you may not always see the abundance, and you may not always have the abundance, and you may not always have everything that you think you need before you start a thing. But when you start a thing that has the blessing of heaven on it, that has the instruction of Jesus on it, and when you take that step of obedience to step out into doing whatever it is that Jesus asks you to do, and you do it in faith, trusting that as you go, it will be provided. Heck, sometimes I do that on here. I like tonight, I didn't have time to review this ahead of time. I come on here, I read it, and as we go, the Lord starts revealing things to us. And right before their very eyes, as they obeyed, the miraculous provision was there. And then at the end, they didn't give the last piece to the last person and be like, oh, wow, I just ran out. Wow, thank God we had enough. It was just enough. No, they had an abundance at the end of the journey. That was the reward for the faith. That was the reward for the obedience that they had in taking that step to do what it was that Jesus told them to do. Let's keep going. Picking up in verse 18. One time when Jesus was praying in a quiet place with his disciples nearby, he came over to them and asked, "Who do people think that I am?" They answered, "Some are convinced you're the prophet John, who has returned. Others say you are Elijah, or perhaps one of the Jewish prophets brought back from the dead." Jesus asked them, "But who do you believe that I am?" Peter said, "You are the anointed one, God's Messiah." Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell this to anyone yet, saying, "The Son of Man is destined to experience great suffering and face complete rejection by the Jewish leaders and religious hierarchy. He will be killed and raised back to life on the third day." Continuing on in verse 23, let's see here. All right, let's go. Give me just 1 second. Okay, verse 23. Jesus said to all his followers, "If you truly desire to be my disciple, you must disown your life completely. Embrace my cross as your own and surrender to my ways. For if you choose self-sacrifice, giving up your lives for my glory, you will embark on a discovery of more and more true life. But if you choose to keep your lives for yourselves, you will lose what you try to keep. Even if you gained all the wealth and power of this world, everything it could offer you, yet you lost your soul in the process, what good is that? So why then are you ashamed of being my disciple? Are you ashamed of the revelation truth I give to you? I, the Son of Man, will one day return in my radiant brightness with the holy angels and in the splendor and majesty of my Father, and I will be ashamed of all who are ashamed of me. But I promise you this, there are some of you standing here right now who will not die until you have witnessed the presence and the power of God's kingdom realm. If you choose self sacrifice, giving up your lives for my glory, you will embark on a discovery of more and more of true life. Saving your life the way that you think it should be saved actually leads to loss, but losing your life for the sake of Jesus leads to true life. So, what does that look like for you? What does taking up your cross daily in practice and practically look like for you right now? Hmm. Think about that. Moving on. 8 days later, Jesus took Peter, Jacob, and John and climbed a high mountain to pray. As he prayed, his face began to glow until it was a blinding glory stream. Well, that sounds kind of cool, doesn't it? That sounds like a cool thing to see. As he prayed, his face began to glow until it was a blinding glory streaming from him. His entire body was illuminated with a radiant glory. His brightness became so intense that it made his clothing blinding white, like multiple flashes of lightning. All at once, two men appeared in glorious splendor, Moses and Elijah. They spoke with Jesus about his soon departure from this world and the things he was destined to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and his companions had become very drowsy, but they became fully awake when they saw the glory and splendor of Jesus standing there and the two men with him. As Moses and Elijah were about to return to heaven, Peter impetuously blurted out, "Master, this is amazing! To see all three of you together." Because remember, Elijah and Moses, they've been dead a long time. "Why don't we stay here and set up three shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah?" While Peter was still speaking, a radiant cloud of glory formed above them and overshadowed them. As the glory cloud enveloped them, they were struck with fear. Then the voice of God thundered from within the cloud, "This is my Son, my beloved one. Listen carefully to all he has to say." When the thunderous voice faded away and the cloud disappeared, Jesus was standing there alone. Peter, James, and John were speechless and awestruck. I can imagine they were. That would have been an amazing thing to witness, don't you think? But they didn't say a word to anyone about what they had seen. They understood without even having to be told by Jesus. They understood the significance and the holiness of whatever they had just witnessed and what had just happened. And they knew that, hey, we probably better not talk about this. So Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on the mountain to pray. His appearance changes completely. His clothes become so bright and dazzling that it says that it was like a blinding glory. Moses and Elijah show up and they start speaking to him about his coming departure, which essentially is they were talking to him about the crucifixion, his death, resurrection, and then subsequent ascension back into heaven. And as they were talking, then God's voice came like thunder in a cloud, saying that, listen carefully, this is my son, my beloved one, listen carefully to all he has to say. So Peter, James, and John are there witnessing this, and they're not only seeing two prophets that have long since been dead, but they're also seeing the blinding glory come on Jesus. They're hearing the conversation between Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, and now they're hearing the voice of God come in and thundering. That was a lot. It was a lot to take in. But the voice, the Father's voice coming in, really grounds or centers everything that they're witnessing, and affirms and confirms and affirms to them to listen to what Jesus is saying. So these are what are called like mountain moments, right? So can you think of any time in your life where you've had a mountain moment that was a true, um, indisputable encounter with God or with Jesus, that you have then been able to carry that experience with you, and encourage your faith during time later in your life, during times of going through a valley season? See, Jesus was about to walk through a very he was about to walk through the shadow of the valley of death, essentially, right? He was going to die, and he knew he was going to die. And so they're coming and they're talking to him and strategizing and talking to him about everything that's going to happen, so that when he gets to the Garden of Gethsemane later and he's sweating blood about what's about to happen, he can hold to this moment and this conversation that he had with Moses and Elijah, knowing the ultimate outcome and what it was going to be. So it was the conversation and the mountain moment that gave him the experience that he needed to carry him through to completion of the task and the assignment that he was sent here to do. And the fact that God the Father put his stamp of approval on it by saying, this is my son, my beloved one, listen carefully to all he has to say. Good stuff. All right, 37. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, a massive crowd was waiting there to meet them. And a man in the crowd shouted desperately, "Please, teacher, I beg of you, do something about my boy. He is my only child. He's possessed by an evil spirit that makes him scream out in torment and hardly ever leaves him alone. It throws him into convulsions and he foams at the mouth. And when it finally does leave him, he's left with horrible bruises. I beg your disciples to drive it out of him, but they didn't even have enough power to do it." Jesus responded, "You are an unbelieving people with no faith. Your lives are twisted with lies that have turned you away from doing what is right. How much longer should I remain here offering you hope?" Then he said to the man, "Bring your son to me." As the boy approached, the demon slammed him to the ground, throwing him into violent convulsions. Jesus sternly commanded the demon to come out of the boy, and immediately it left. Jesus healed the boy of his injuries and returned him to his father, saying, "Here is your son." Everyone was awestruck. They were stunned, seeing the power and majesty of God flow through Jesus. While everyone marveled, trying to process what they had just witnessed, Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "This is very important, so listen carefully and remember my words. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed and given over to the authority of men." But the disciples were unable to perceive what he was saying, for it was a veiled mystery to them, and they were too embarrassed to ask him to explain it. Now, going back to what God the Father said during the mountain experience, this is my son, my beloved one. Listen carefully to all he has to say. He made that statement and that declaration so that Peter, James, and John, who were there to hear that, could confirm to the other disciples that all this stuff that Jesus just said, that he just shared with them, was important information for them to pay attention to, because he's basically telling them what's about to happen. Now, they didn't understand it, they didn't have the ability to perceive it, but they also didn't ask for whatever reason. It says they were too embarrassed to ask him to explain it. But remember, God had given that instruction, hey, listen to what he's going to say, because the things he's about to tell you, they're true, and they're part of, what's to come. Let me see here. Okay. Hey, Lourdes, good to see you here in the room. Thanks for being here tonight. I know it's late. I am much later than I planned to be this evening. All right, so let's move on to Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. Nope, not quite there. I almost skipped a section. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Okay, so we're picking up in verse 46. The disciples began to argue and became preoccupied over who would be the greatest one among them. Fully aware of their innermost thoughts, Jesus called a little child to his side and said to them, if you tenderly care for this little child on my behalf, you are tenderly caring for me. And if you care for me, you are honoring my Father who sent me. For the one who is least important in your eyes is actually the most important one of all. The disciple John said, Master, we found someone who was casting out demons using your name, and we tried to stop him because he doesn't follow you like we do. Jesus responded, you shouldn't have hindered him, for anyone who is not against you is your friend. So the disciples, they were all caught up in arguing about who's the most important one, who's Jesus's bestie, right? And so Jesus, knowing all this was going on, he places a child next to him, and he starts explaining and says that receiving the least of these, like the one that seems to be the least important, is what leads to true greatness. So Jesus really at that point redefines or reframes for the disciples what true greatness really is. It's not, it's not a competition. It's not based on, stats. But true greatness in the eyes of the Lord and in the kingdom is really humility and childlikeness and tenderness and being welcoming and open. And what does the child represent? A child represents someone who's vulnerable, someone who's dependent, someone who maybe hasn't established themselves and become independently functional yet. So Jesus is basically looking at one of the most vulnerable and the most dependent beings and saying that this is what leads to greatness. And that vulnerability and dependency is dependency on him, not on each other. We're not talking about codependency here. We're talking about dependency on the Lord and having humility and teachability and belief and wonder. Like a kid will believe anything, if there's any kids listening, plug your ears. But like Santa Claus, right? Kids will believe anything. And so that it's kind of like, if we come to the Lord like a child, then we have that faith to believe whatever it is that he's asking us or telling us. We have little doubt, little if any doubt, that he can and will do and perform what he said he would do. So that's how God looks at true greatness, not in competing, comparing, or needing to feel important, but by being humble and welcoming those who may seem weak or small or outside of your group or not living up to the measure of what you think they should be, that kind of situation. So now Jesus starts his journey to Jerusalem after this. So Jesus passionately determined to leave for Jerusalem and let nothing distract him from fulfilling his mission there, for the time for him to be lifted up was drawing near. So he sent messengers ahead of him as his envoy to a village of the Samaritans. But as they approached the village, they were turned away. Now remember, Jewish people and Samaritans, they weren't friends. Keep that in mind. The Samaritans were considered kind of a lower class to the Jewish people. So Jewish people kind of snubbed them and didn't want to have anything to do with them. But as they approached the village, they were turned away. They would not allow Jesus to enter, for he was on his way to worship in Jerusalem. So even the Samaritans were like, we don't want any Jews up in here. When the disciples, James and John, realized what was happening, they came to Jesus and said, Lord, if you wanted to, you could command fire to fall down from heaven just like Elijah did, and it would destroy all these wicked people. Jesus rebuked them sharply, saying, don't you realize what comes from your hearts when you say that? Remember, we talked about this a couple of days ago. Whatever's in the heart will overflow and come out of your mouth, so you have to listen to your words to keep your heart clean, and then also guard your heart against the thorny things, the gravel and the birds still in the way, so that you can keep your heart in that good soil posture. Jesus rebuked them sharply, saying, don't you realize what comes from your hearts when you say that? For the Son of Man did not come to destroy life, but to bring life to the earth. So they went to another village instead. That reminds me of the divisive political spirit that is out in the world today, and how one side of the party hates the other side of the party so much they wish harm on them, or they want to unalive them, and vice versa. So that is a condition of the heart, and that's a divisive political spirit, and it's not kingdom, and it's not of God. And Jesus is saying here, so this was a similar situation between Samaritans and Jews, right? They didn't like each other so much that the disciples who had been following Jesus for how long now? And traveling with Jesus for how long now? Had seen all the miracles and all the power that he had. And their first thought is, they won't let us in their city, so let's rain down fire from heaven and kill them all. And Jesus is like, what are you thinking? Do you understand what's in your heart when you say stuff like that? Jesus says, for the Son of Man, talking about himself here, did not come to destroy life, but to bring life to the earth. So they went to another village instead. On their way, someone came up to Jesus and said, I want to follow you wherever you go. Jesus replied, okay, but remember this. Even animals in the field have holes in the ground to sleep in, and birds have their nests, but the Son of Man has no place here to lay down his head. Jesus then turned to another and said, come, be my disciple. He replied, someday I will, Lord, but allow me first to fulfill my duty as a good son and wait until my father passes away. Jesus told him, don't wait for your father's burial. Let those who are already dead wait for death. But as for you, go and proclaim everywhere that God's kingdom has arrived. Still another said to him, Lord, I want to follow you too. But first, let me go home and say goodbye to my family. Jesus responded, "Why do you keep looking backward to your past and have second thoughts about following me? When you turn back, you are useless to the God's kingdom realm." When you turn back, you are useless to God's kingdom realm. That concludes Luke chapter 9. So there were three people there in that last section that expressed interest in following Jesus. And for each of them, he responded with strong words. Following him, following Jesus, means no guaranteed comfort, having a sense of urgency that is beyond cultural expectations, and not looking back once you've begun. And what I mean by the urgency that surpasses cultural expectations is, in that culture, it was a son's duty to take care of his parents until they passed. So for Jesus to say the kingdom of God is more urgent than your cultural responsibility of being a good son, and then to the one who wanted to, hey, let me go say bye to my family. I get what you're saying about the cultural expectation, but let me at least go say bye. And he's saying, no, looking back once you've begun, that's no use to the kingdom. So does this mean everybody abandon your parents and stop talking to your family? No, that's not what Jesus is saying here. He was making a point, because there's great honor also in caring for your loved ones. I had that great honor of caring for my dad before he passed, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. That was my kingdom assignment. But discipleship is costly, and it could include some instability, it could include some sacrifice, and it could require a realignment of your priorities. Those are the points that Jesus was trying to make here. That even the good and the honorable things have to be balanced and measured against and aligned with kingdom urgency. So if there's a divided heart that is always looking back at the past, or always looking about what could have been or what might have been, then that temptation to keep looking back instead of moving forward with him for the kingdom assignment that has been placed there, that is a hindrance to the kingdom, not a help to it. That's basically what he was saying there. So, how then can we look at our own lives and identify any comforts or expectations that we may feel are being threatened if we choose to follow Jesus wholeheartedly, if we choose to take those steps of faith and obedience that we talked about in the first part of the chapter, that require us to move forward even when we don't yet have everything we think we need to do it. Those things come as we move and go, grow and go, right? So, because we're trying to connect most of this that we're talking about in this Advent reading to the topics of grief and loss for those who are walking through that in the holiday season, grief, just like discipleship, can be costly and require sacrifice and things like that. Grief already feels like that costly road. It already can feel sharp, and but carrying that hope that no matter where you are in that grief or loss cycle right now, that carrying that hope that your life is not over, and that Jesus is still inviting you to walk with him. And there's a before and there's an after in your story. And Jesus isn't necessarily asking us to erase the before, because that becomes our testimony at some point, right? But he does invite us to trust him with the after, and to take those steps to move forward even when we don't think we have what we need to do it. But as we take that step, then we'll see the miracle and the miracle provision, just like with the loaves and fishes. We'll begin to see that unfold and see that happen as we take those steps to move forward. So, for somebody grieving, we could receive this and hear this as Jesus saying that there's still a path with me ahead of you, even from here where you are now. And in the midst of the pain, the wound, the bleeding, like we talked about last night, even in the midst of that, there's still a hope for a future and there's still provision for the healing. Just take that first step toward Him so that He can, so that as you move closer or move farther down that path and move into that journey more with Him, then then things are going to get brighter. The path of the righteous grows brighter and brighter. Remember, we talked about that last night too. So as you move farther, closer to Him, and you get closer to deeper into that healing process, and the bleeding slows, the wound becomes less painful, and the memory remains there. The scar remains from the wound. The scar remains from the grief and from the loss, but the but it's there as a beautiful memory and a beautiful reminder of the love that existed. So that's all I got for tonight. Jesus, we thank you for your presence here with us tonight. We thank you for Luke chapter 9 and all the wonderful life lessons that are there in there tonight. I thank you for the people who tuned in live this evening, and I thank you for the people who will catch this on the replay tomorrow or later today. But Lord, I just pray their blessing. I pray blessings over each and every one of them, no matter when they're watching this. And I ask, God, that you would just be with them, that you would be ever close to them, that you would bring comfort, that you would bring hope, that you would bring encouragement. And Lord, if there is somebody who you're nudging to take a step out in faith and in obedience to do something or to move forward with something that you've talked to them about, and they're hesitant to do so because they don't feel like they have everything they need yet, then God, I pray that you would um, just inject them with an extra measure of courage and an extra measure of faith to take that step forward and to move into those promises with you. And I ask, God, that as they go, just like the disciples, as they passed out the loaves and the fishes, it just didn't run out. And by the time they got to the end of the journey, there was an abundance, which was the reward for their faith, the reward for their obedience. So I ask for that same blessing to rest on all the people watching live and on the replay at any point in time, now or in the future. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, guys. Thanks again for being here. I appreciate you watching and doing this Advent reading with me through the book of Luke. I'm enjoying it immensely. I hope you are too. Drop some comments. Let me know what your biggest takeaway is. If you're watching on the replay, give me a hashtag replay. And I guess we will see you back here tomorrow. I will do my best to be earlier. I know I said that last night, and I ended up being later. But it was a bit outside of my control this evening on the timing, just because of some work deadlines and priorities that I needed to get done so that we can launch this funnel that we're trying to launch. So I hope you guys have a good evening. I'll see you back here tomorrow sometime between the hours of 8 and 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And take care. God bless. Peace.